Hey, hi, good evening, folks. Hope you all are doing wonderful today. Thank you so much for joining on time. We would be giving it a go now since it's just gonna be us. All right, can I get a quick confirmation, folks, that you all can see my screen and you can hear me pretty well?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, wonderful. So yesterday we started with STLC. Now, see, STLC, we talked about all those 7 phases, right? Now, moving further, most of you are already aware of what this is. Moving further, what do we have is we have the models. Now, what are models? Models, if I tell you, so STLC is an approach. It's a fundamental way of following, using which your organization can actually create these software applications. Now, models are all about how the industry is actually practicing SDLC. There are different ways that industry can adopt to the SDLC approach, SDLC methodology. Okay, and that is what we call as models. So models, primarily there are multiple types. But we would be focusing onto these two, waterfall and agile. Nowadays, 95, in fact, more than 95% of the organizations are using agile for their software development. And those almost 5% which are using waterfall, they are also either migrating to agile or in the process of migrating towards agile. Okay, so it's all about agile nowadays, and that's what we'll be focusing more on too. Before we jump onto that, just a quick recap of waterfall. Waterfall, first of all, the name suggests that it is all about falling water in one direction, which means you cannot go back. Okay? You can only move forward. That's the first thing. Second thing, if you're moving from one stage to another stage, you must complete that stage fully. You can't say, I have done with the partial design of my application and I can start the development. See, there is planning as well. It's not that planning is not there, but it's combined with requirement analysis. This implementation is your development phase. That's how it is. So you must complete a step for the whole project. So whole project requirement analysis, whole project design, whole project development, then only this is how we are moving further. So partial implementation of any stage is not allowed. Okay. So which means if you have a project, you have to complete the design for all the project because generally what happens now, when you are creating a project or an application, you will be dividing, of course, that application into some specific modules, right? Modules are more like your independent yet interconnected components, or to be more specific, functional components, right? Which will make that whole application. It's not that waterfall is lacking this modularization. No. Waterfall also, you will do things in module only. No problems. Like let's say if you have a design team, some people can work on the design of this, and this. And similarly, things can be there in the development. The only problem here is until unless all of these modules design is completed, you cannot go to the development. Until all of these modules are not developed, you cannot go with the testing. It's not that you created M1 design and you can start with the M1 development and then you can start with the M1 testing. And in parallel, there will be someone doing the M2 design while the M1 is being tested. No, that way it doesn't work here in Waterfall. Full all application design, all application development, all application testing will be at once. Okay. And because of that, it is a too much time taking process. And we know that we are introducing client here, right? In the requirement analysis. That's where you interact with the client. Okay. But during these three phases, design, development, testing, there is no client interaction. That is the biggest problem with waterfall because you're not doing partially, you're going with the full application design, development, and testing. This might take like 6 months or like 1 year or 1.5 year, whatever it is. And during that, there is no interaction with the client. Requirement may change, technology may change, right? And by the time you're coming up here, the client will not be getting what he or she has expected because there is a huge communication gap in between. In between also, because if you have started with the wrong requirements, then wrong design, wrong implementation, wrong testing, because you're not communicating anything to the client in between, so you'll end up with a wrong deployment. That's why in this case, because we need to be very sure about the requirements and we need to be sure that these are not going to change during this whole development period. So you have to put a lot of efforts in the requirement analysis as well. Sometimes requirement analysis itself is taking time more than the development. That's how it is. It's a very, though like looks simple, right? Very simple process to follow, but it has its own disadvantages in that particular way. And that's what they have mentioned like here as well. No returning, each stage is depending upon the data from the last stage. And next stage cannot start before the previous one is completed. Right. And the one more important aspect of the waterfall was strict documentation. Everything is strictly documented. That's how it all goes up in here. See, here also similarly, we can see that it is all about this. So you have project manager who will do the planning, right? Planning is all about who will do what and what will be done when. Who I told you it is all about roles. What I told you it is all about responsibilities. And when I have told you is all about the schedule. That's what your project manager is going to take care of. Then here we have BA. So this looks like your requirement analysis. Okay. Here we have the architect. So this is going to be your design. Here we have developers. So there could be one like back end developer and front end developer, right? Two development teams can be there, or one could be taking care of all the application part, other would be taking care of all the other aspects like database, services, and all that. Then there will be testing, then there will be delivery. But before delivery, there will be UAT. I'll talk about the UAT. But first thing first, in the requirement analysis itself, we are getting someone known as SME. Any wild guesses about the SME folks? Any one of you knows what SME is, or any wild guesses, even if you don't know? What could be this SME?
Subject matter expert, if I'm not wrong.
Subject expertise, yes, you got it correct. But any ideas what this SME is doing here in the requirement analysis with the BA? Because BA, we know what BAs are doing in the requirement analysis because we have our client here, right? From client, they're gonna take down the requirements. So basically what happens now, see, in this, you have multiple domains. Like you could be having that application from finance and banking, or education, retail, healthcare, military. There are multiple domains. Now, BAs are pretty much good with all the BA skills like communication, documentation, analytical skills, a bit of technical knowledge of all of the development process as well. Right? BAs are not programmers, but they know the business analyst analysis skills. But BAs might be lacking that specific domain knowledge. Okay, BA might not know what happens in healthcare, what happens in banking and finance. But to understand the client requirements well, they need someone who has years of expertise in that domain. Let's say you have a banking client, so you will get someone who has like 10 to 15 years, 20 years, 25, 30 years, who knows like everything. what goes in, what comes out, everything about that domain. That's where you have SMEs. Okay. So these will work with BAs to understand the requirement so that BAs can understand the requirement in a better way and they can come up with the required requirement documentation accordingly. Because before we start anything, BAs must understand the requirements correctly. And that's where SMEs is going to help them. This was old way of doing things. Nowadays also, if your organization can afford, you can have SMEs. But nowadays, it's not just BA. Nowadays, it is healthcare BA, finance and banking BA. So, being a BA, you should be knowing about that particular domain as well. You can learn. See, that's why, like, if you are from a banking background, it is okay for you to become a banking BA. If you are from a healthcare background, it's okay for you to become a healthcare BA. Right? Nowadays, there are other positions like Salesforce BA, ServiceNow BA. What are all those? Banking BA, healthcare BA. These are all where they expect you to know a bit about that particular domain as well. Being a BA, you will do everything what is required to do, right? But other than that, you would also have the domain expertise. And because this is the team responsible for all the communication with the client, during design, development, and testing, there will be no client communication. You would simply call in the client again when your technical development is over, and you will call your client in the UAT. Any wild guesses for UAT? Anyone? What do you guys think what a UAT could be?
User acceptance testing.
User acceptance testing. Wonderful. Right? Now, user acceptance testing is all about right before the delivery, we are doing it. Okay, it's part of testing only, but this is why it is mentioned here separately because that's where you're going to call in the client that, hey, you gave us the requirement in the beginning. Now we're done with all of our process, but before we go with the delivery, we are asking you to come here and do a final check that whether the application is according to your requirements or not. And that's what we call as UAT. If there are problems, then it will go into this direction because test engineers will verify that, okay, there is an error. The error will be reported to the development team. Development team will fix that error and again we'll have a UAT session. That is how it. But if the customer is satisfied, then you would be going with the delivery of that application to the customer. That is all about like waterfall. There are other models as well, but that's okay, even if we don't discuss all of that. That is not going to be an issue. Just more of these are. But yeah, first we'll discuss HR. Now, when we have the understanding of this one, we can move to the HR directly. Now, since you guys are already into that domain, as you have told me yesterday, that's why for you, I'm jumping in here directly. Basic concepts I need not to go with you because I want to quickly start the practical implementation. We will go with Jira after this. So now when you talk about agile software development methodology, there are a few key terminologies that you need to know. Now in agile, you'll go with Scrum or Kanban, right? Scrum, we go with sprint, right? Now, if you're going with Agile, it's not just going to be Agile. Either it is going to be Agile Scrum or it is going to be Agile Kanban. That's how it is going to be. So we'll talk about both of these, right? Now, similar approach. If you are aware of that, wonderful. If you're not, I'm going to tell you. So here also what would do is you have your application. Your application will be divided in modules. Okay. And you decide to complete one module in one sprint. Now, sprint is basically your overall development cycle to implement one such module or one such bunch of requirements, right? But I call it as this is sprint as a short-term development cycle because it is having all the development cycle activities like planning, designing, development, testing, deploying, everything is here, right? But it is a very short term, short duration. That short duration could be as less as 2 weeks. Nowadays, they are even allowing 1 week. So it's going to be 1 to 4 weeks of the duration. Ideal duration is 2 weeks in the industry, how they practice, but it's not necessary depending upon your project requirements, depending upon how your organization work. You can even have that 3 weeks, 4 weeks as well. But maximum, generally, we don't go beyond 4 weeks. Okay. So within that, so let's say if I'm picking up 2 weeks, so within those 2 weeks, I have to plan, design, develop, testing, and deploy a working increment. Why we are calling it as increment? Because every time you will do this, you will be coming up with some addition to your application. That's why we are calling it as an increment, right? Because you're adding with every of this sprint, you're adding something to the application. And at the end of this, you will have the module one delivered. At the end of this, you'll have module two delivered. And at the end of this, you'll have module three delivered. And by combining these all, we're going to get our application. So it will be appended, keep adding that up in here. That is what your HR Scrum sprint is all about, right? Let me know if you want to add something to it, right? Because since you guys are already working with this, now I have this document which will help us to understand some key terminologies in this Agile Scrum. Because what do we have here is Agile Scrum is we have, first of all, let's just talk about the team. Now, since you guys have told me that you're already aware of this, what do we have here is this is our Scrum team because we are going with Agile Scrum. Okay. Now, in the Scrum team, as you can see, we have development team, which is based primarily, these guys are your designer, programmer, and tester. Plus, there will be other people who are responsible for the implementation of your application. Okay. Now, when we are going with the implementation, we have these two new folks here. One, we are calling it as a product owner and Scrum Master. Anyone has any idea about these two? What do you mean by product owner? Any wild guesses? Product owner? Anyone?
So,
Um,
according to me, maybe product owners discuss with the client and he, he design a plan according to that and pass those information to the development team or something like that.
Yes, you got it correct. What about others? No.
he's the person that gets the final product. He's the person that gets the end result of the software we're making.
It's wonderful. Because see, when we're talking about agile here, you guys are correct, right? Because you have two things. One is the product, which is basically your application. Okay. Another thing is the overall process. Because HR, you need to understand the process and you have to work accordingly so that things can be efficient and effective from the implementation perspective. Now, to take care of the application product, we need someone responsible. So yes, you got it correct that it's going to be product owner, right? And the other answer was also correct because these are the things that this product owner is going to do. So he's responsible for the overall application delivery and development. He's not going to develop the application, responsible for keeping track of that, this guy, right? And this is just one person, it's not going to be a group of folks, okay? Scrum Master is taking care of your process. Not everyone understands what happens in a Scrum. So Scrum Master is going to make sure that everyone understands this process. If anyone has any issues with the process, they go to Scrum Master. If anyone has any questions or doubts related to the application product, they go to the product owner. Right, that's how it is. And we have a development team who is responsible for creating everything. Stakeholders are there, but those are not part of the Scrum team. Stakeholders would be just collaborating with the Scrum team from outside. There are some artifacts as well, product backlog, sprint backlog. We will do all of this in Jira. Okay, I'll make you experience Jira with these. So we'll do that. Product backlog, sprint backlog, increment, definition, and we'll talk about these actually. Plus, something we have here is Scrum events. Events, or people are also calling these as activities, or you might have heard about this word ceremonies. This is all Scrum events. So if anyone talks about what they mean by Scrum events or Scrum activities or Scrum ceremonies, you should be knowing that these are the ones. Overall sprint, planning, daily Scrum, sprint review, and sprint retrospective. These are the activities in a Scrum. Now, first thing first, we will talk about the sprint. Now, as you can see here, that this is going to be all of your sprint. right? And what do we have here is that this sprint, just the overall activity. It is divided in those 4 others. This is like overall, but has the combination of these 4. Now, what is happening in which stage? That we would be discussing now quickly. Plus, because then we are going to practice of all of this in Jira as well. Now, see, the thing is, before we start anything, we need sprint planning. And in the sprint planning, this green guy, the product owner, he's going to come up with this something known as product backlog. Now, I told you that initially we are going to create a product. Product is basically your application. That is product. Backlog. Backlog means something which is pending, something which is not done yet. Okay, so that's what you have here as your backlog. Now, in this product backlog, so whatever is pending here from that product perspective, that all will come here. Now, because we are just starting, right? Because we're just starting it here. So everything is pending. So we're gonna have all what is pending. Pending as in, because see, I told you this yesterday itself, that when you are talking about software development, I consider software development as you're getting requirements from the client and you're delivering application to the client. So ultimately, what you're doing as a software development team is you are converting these requirements or implementing these requirements as a feature or functionality in the application. But before you do that, you should know what are those requirements. So this is actually basically going to be the overall list of all the requirements. Yes. Now you'd say that, okay, we are talking about requirements. Then where are BAs? Because when we talked about this technical development team here, we talked about designers, programmers, test engineers, and some other folks. But where are the most important BAs here? So BAs actually primarily working under the shadow of the product owner. They work super closely with the product owner. And that's why in most of the cases, to these BAs, you're going to call as proxy product owners as well. So we're going to have our BAs because wherever there is a client interaction, wherever there is something related to the requirements, you need to get these BAs. So this product backlog is owned by product owner. Yes, no doubt about that. But it is created, those support from the BAs because all the client interaction, taking down those requirements, coming up with the finished set of requirements from the client. That is what this product backlog is all about. Now we are in the sprint planning session because we're going to go with the sprint. I told you that you will have your application developed in few modules. And you plan to complete everything for one module in that particular sprint. But before you start with that sprint, you need to make sure what we are going to do in here. So that what you will get from product backlog because product owners will be discussing with VAs. In this sprint planning meeting, they'll include the technical development team as well, because they need to know what needs to be done. How it is going to be implemented, that is all the responsibility of this development team. They will take care of that. They're not going to ask the other team members that, okay, how we are going to do this. They'll just go with that. Right? Now, once this is done, so they will have the planning meeting. In that, all will agree to a sprint goal that, okay, by the end of this sprint, we should be having this much of work done. And that work they will pick up from this product backlog only. Because product backlog is what? The overall set of requirements. And because we are going to go with all of this in sprint. And I told you that with one sprint, if you are creating one module or something, because we are going with a partial development for each of these. And that is the reason that when I'll be here, I will pick up some of these backlogs from the product backlog, and I'll put those here to something what I call as sprint backlog. Now, backlog, we know list of pending stuff. Sprint backlog means pending in sprint that you have to complete in that sprint. And that you'll take from the product backlog. We'll do all of this in Jira, but this is how it is. And once done, you'll have the sprint backlog being. Now, all the how part will be taken care by our development team. So these green bars we have picked up from the product backlog that, okay, these are the requirements which we are planning to complete in this particular sprint, only for this sprint. And technical development team will create tasks, like let's say if it is a login functionality, then what is the job of designers or database designers? We have UI designers. Okay, that will do that. They will do the design. Meanwhile, we'll go with the database. So we'll talk about the sprint. And that's how it is. Okay. So they will create these small tasks. You see, it belongs to these guys. Same color. So these are basically the tasks, individual tasks to implement that. And this is the backlog that you will get from the. To implement these, there will be tasks created that will be done by your development team. So this is going to be the overall planning for that one sprint. Because before we start, we need to know what and how much we are going to develop in this sprint, because we have 2 weeks. Ideally, I'm talking about. You can have 3-4 weeks as well, but 2 weeks of that. And that's how it is. This is sprint planning. Now, once your planning is done, you can start with this, your sprint. Let's say if it is a 2-week sprint, that for the 2 weeks, this is what you're going to do. Now, since you all are part of that process already, you might be knowing about daily scrum. What happens in a daily scrum, if anyone can talk about? What happens in that daily scrum?
In the daily scrum, the scrum master usually go like to each individual developers and they ask like what backlogs they'll pick for today and how much work is done, like basic what we are up till now, or if they have any discrepancies or any difficulties, then they talk about it there.
Yes, you are correct. Because first of all, this daily scrum, the name here is daily. Daily as in it is happening every day. Right? You can have it at like any time. Ideally, you should do it as a very first thing in the morning before anyone starts their work. Okay. Now, these are pretty short, crisp meetings, 15 minutes max. It can go 20 minutes. In some cases, it is even going 10 minutes. Only discussion is what I did yesterday, what I'm gonna do today, and any problems if I'm facing. That's it. Okay. Because we're meeting every day. So you can tell that, okay, what I did yesterday, if it is happening as the very first thing in the morning. What I did yesterday, what I'm going to do today, and if any issues I'm facing. That's it. And everyone from the team would participate in this. That is your daily scrum. Okay, right. And the team here is also, because this is where the real work is happening. Right. We have 2 weeks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then Saturday, Sunday. Then again Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that way it will be 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, whatever they have to do, they'll create their own task plan and they will replace it. Now, once this is all over, let's say 2 weeks are gone. Now, there will be something known as review. Any wild guesses about the review? Anyone? What do you think a review is?
They review it what has been done.
Okay, yes. It's more like the UAT that we talked about earlier, right? Review is not, but the best part here is it's not like your this waterfall. Best part is we had this sprint duration of 2 weeks, let's say hypothetically. So right after the 2 weeks, I am calling in client. That's the best part. To take feedback on to what I did here in these 2 weeks. We had a discussion in the beginning. Then we went ahead with everyday Scrum, and that's the result in 2 weeks. You're going to showcase that to the client. Now, client might talk about 3 things. First, adding a new feature, removing an old feature, and bug fixes. That's it. That's how it is. So in the sprint review, yes, you're correct. You are going to call in the client. Client will provide its feedback onto what you have developed in these 2 weeks. Technical development team will demonstrate, right, that, okay, hey, we have developed this. They will provide the feedback. So adding a new feature, removing an old feature, or fixing the bug. These all could be here. And if they are, because see, we started with the sprint backlog, picking up these from here. And sprint backlog is something that we follow in this whole sprint. So if you're going with this, it's going to have that increment being verified by the customer every year. That is what your sprint review is. You'll take feedback, and based on to the feedback, see, you are claiming that, okay, we started with this and we have completed this, right? But whether the client is happy or not, that feedback client will provide about each of the stuff that you have implemented here. That is what we have in this sprint review. Right after the review, we're going to have retrospective. Retrospective is also a meeting right before the next sprint planning. We will see, I'll put it in a pretty much nutshell. What went wrong, what we did right. That's it. Then, most importantly, how we can improve before we start our next sprint here. That is retrospective. It's among team members. There's no client involvement in this. It is all about improving the current process that you're going through with. That is what you call as retrospective in here. All team members will get together and discuss that, okay, because they have just completed one sprint. So they need to discuss how was it, any issues if they faced, any suggestions, any solutions that they can come up with, any bottlenecks, those needs to be removed. All that discussion will be here in this retrospective. Once this is over, they can go ahead with the next sprint planning and things will go in the same direction. This is Agile Scrum Sprint. That is how it is. This is how it will go in the Agile. We'll see all of this in Jira as well. Before we do that, do we have any questions so far?
So I have a question. In sprint proactive, I'm sorry.
Retrospect. You
Yeah,
can call it as retro. Yeah.
Okay. So, what is the role of the Scrum? Like, are they just taking notes for the next sprint, or do they have a say in there? Like, okay, this we can do, this not, or this went well in the other sprints. I mean, a sprint review or the going on sprint they are right now.
No, retrospective is more like, an internal evaluation of the whole thing that has just finished. It's not just about the product. It is all about that because everyone from the team is, like gathering here. And you see, let's say if your sprint duration for like 1 month, let's say like 4 weeks, then for that 4 weeks of sprint that you just completed, this meeting may go like 3 hours. 3 hours they'll discuss that, okay, we just completed a sprint, right? So what was good about that sprint? What are the problems that we faced? How we can resolve those issues before we start our next sprint planning. Because we are just completed this one, right? Only one sprint we have completed. Now, before we starting the second one, we are having a brief discussion on if any bottlenecks are there, which can help us to improve the efficiency in the upcoming sprint. That's it, nothing. And this will be happening after every sprint here. So you'll have that retro meeting after every sprint just to discuss any bottlenecks and what were the good things. So good things you have to foster in your upcoming sprint. Bad things you have to fix before you start your next sprint. So it's all about, making the overall process better, and more better. That is what generally these retro meetings are all about, or retro sessions. Right? Now, if you are saying that, okay, what like were you talking about this red guy here, the Scrum Master? Like what he's or she's doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, see, he's gonna be the leader of this whole process. He's gonna lead everyone with this whole Scrum process. Because see, here initially I told you all that we have two things to take care of. One, of course, is the product,
Mhm.
which is our application. But Agile, actually, see how this Scrum Master role came into practice, I'll tell you.
Mm.
When we started with Agile, right,
Mhm.
people were actually people were actually not aware of like how to work in this agile environment or with this agile software development methodology or agile approach because all were using waterfall and some other models in there, right? So they had that approach in mind, so they needed someone who can guide them with the process that okay, now it's not waterfall, it's agile scrum, and this is how we do things in agile scrum, and that someone is basically your scrum master. Earlier, like this is how it all started. So they needed someone who can guide everyone that, hey, this is how this HR Scrum process works, right? You have to do this first and then this and then, because this is not your legacy software development methodology like waterfall. No, it's super different. So initially,
Yeah.
people were struggling to understand that, okay, it's new, it's effective, but how to do it? Can we have someone? Who can we know software development, we know how to create applications, but what about this new process? So can we have someone who can actually guide us through this process? And if we are deviating from that process, he can simply make us do the necessary adjustment to come back on the track again. So that's what the Scrum Master actually does. Now, nowadays, everyone knows about HR Scrum, so which is fine. So nowadays, it takes care of some of those leadership responsibilities as well, Scrum Master. But primarily, as per the definition, the role says that yes, he's the one who's going to help everyone about like what actually the sprint is, right? How you have this. That is what you have in this or with this Scrum Master.
Mhm.
Like that's how this role started. Nowadays, it's a bit different. Like they are more like your sometimes in some cases acting like a project manager as well. Right? That okay, they takes care of the overall process and everything. Because product owner, the green guy here,
Yeah.
responsible for the overall development of the application, about the process, right? How we're gonna do it, all that. If you need to ask, you have Scrum Master for that. That's how it is. You see here, yeah, during the daily Scrum, like every day as well, you're just clearing the path,
Yeah.
reviewing each sprint. Here also
So,
ensuring transparency. Yes, please.
yeah. The reason I ask you, my last project, I like couple of weeks, I acted as a scrum, but I was just doing the whatever like daily scrum meetings, and the product owner was not there. So I had the backlog,
Mm-hmm.
and I one sprint, I know what was and whatever the draw like whatever the differences was or whatever there are not done in the first sprint, I used to go back to the product owner because they were not involved in this daily scrum meetings or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I never went to the last part of this sprint because before that they had a budget cut and I got laid off. So that's
Okay.
why I was asking what would be the role for them over there.
Yeah, like that's what. Retrospectively, see, if you have pretty competitive environment and they're moving like super fast, they might cut down this retrospective meeting to, a few minutes call as well. If they
Mhm.
feel that okay, everything is going fine. Because this is here we in the retrospective, we don't have any client involvement. It is
Yeah.
internal to the team, right? So if they feel that everything is going fine, or sometimes in some cases, this team may decide to go with the retrospective towards the end of the project itself. That okay, let's discuss now. We're done with the project. Let's discuss now what like went well, where we were struggling, so that before we start the next project, we can do that. But the ideal practice that we have here is this. The ideal practice is that
Yeah.
you must go with this
Mhm.
before you start with your next sprint. Because every sprint you have to evolve, you have to make those improvements in there so that you can go with the like super effectively in your upcoming sprint. That's all.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. So this is how it would be up in here. And this is where we have our this what do you call it? HR Scrum. Right.
Mhm.
Now, I have already shared this document with you. You can just go through with that. And if you face any difficulty anywhere, you can ask a question like similar approach. Yes.
Can you please share the one you have the all the agile scrum, the whole sprint explanation? Yeah, the one you were showing before.
Yes, like the presentation you're talking about.
Not the presentation, the separate slide you were showing, in which there were like all the little guys, green, red, blue.
Uh-huh. PDF. Yes. I shared that yesterday as well. I'll share it now again, no problem. Also, I have this Scrum guide also that would give you more details about the process. I'm just gonna put all of this in the chat. Meet Scrum chart, user stories also we'll discuss that tomorrow. We'll go with the Jira implementation. That is so this is actually the Meet Scrum chart. So you guys can go through with these. Yes, I have uploaded again these documents. Guys can download that. Go through with that. If you have any errors, you can take a screenshot, keep it handy, and you can ask me when we meet next. Right? Or you can take that note, take that down as a note in a paper, and you can ask that same question to me in our next session.
Sure.
Right. All right, so we'll be calling it a day for today. That's all what I have for the day today. Tomorrow I'll try to jump onto the Jira, this up in here. Do we have any questions before we call it a day today?
Not from my side.
All right, busy. I'll be jumping on to another call. All right, then yeah, thank you so much, folks, for joining in, and see you all tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good night. Bye.
Yeah,